I want to welcome you to the Pro Mindset Podcast. The Pro Mindset Podcast is all about diving into the headspace that results in championship performance. High-performing athletes, winners, have this mental flow and have a positive headspace for their performances and success. Join me, Craig Domann, sports attorney and NFL agent, on this podcast. I will interview pro athletes, college athletes, football coaches, and sports personalities. Together, we can discover how you can get in the flow and have your own pro mindset. Today, I want to welcome former longtime friend and client, Chris Kuper. Was drafted by the Denver Broncos. Chris, what year? 2006?
Yep.
2006. Started a bunch of games, played during the Kyle Orton, Tebow era, and transitioned out of football, and now is the assistant offensive line coach with the Denver Broncos. Chris, I want to welcome you to Pro Mindset today.
Thanks for having me.
Chris, what is the mindset you had when you were living in Anchorage, Alaska, and you wanted to play college football, and you and your dad are sitting there trying to figure out how do we get a scholarship? Kind of share with us your journey from Anchorage to North Dakota to the NFL.
So growing up in Anchorage, my first sport was hockey. So I grew up playing hockey probably from age 5 to 16 or 17. I started playing football at 8 years old, and I always thought hockey was going to be my sport. I was always kind of, bigger end of middle of the road in terms of size and all that stuff. And, so I obviously, I played hockey till I was about 16, 17, played football all the way through that time, but I was a quarterback, played skill position. And, once I got in high school, played a couple years of quarterback and then hit a growth spurt. Kind of ended my hockey days because I was a goalie, lost all my flexibility, because I was, still growing. So I was just trying to figure out, how his body works at that point. And I moved from quarterback to offensive line. So it wasn't like I was sitting there at 10 years old thinking I'm going to be a professional offensive lineman. I thought I was going to be a professional hockey player. And, all kids, they're going to be professional at something, some sport. So that was kind of the mindset. As we got closer and as I got in, started to get some recruiting letters in high school, it was all based off size. So I had these two suitcases full of letters, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to go to, Cal, I'm going to go to Stanford, Oregon, whatever. And because we didn't have much experience with college football and no one really did ask questions because everyone's a hockey player there, assumed that there was a scholarship coming at the end of all this, which there wasn't. So late in the process, our defensive coordinator was alumni at my alma mater, which is the University of North Dakota. Brought our state championship game tape up there. He went to go visit, and they started recruiting me late in the process. So North Dakota worked out great for me. I was developing my size, height, weight, all that stuff. Body was starting to catch up, and also I was a blank slate as far as offensive line play goes. So I just kind of learned on the run. And as I grew into like my final size range, which was between 6'4", 300, 310, I started to figure out how to play the position a little bit better. And I had a guy in college that was he had a camp or 2 camps, I think, with the Jets. And he's probably about 10 years older than me. He was kind of like a host family for me. He volunteered, coach, so I'd do a bunch of stuff with him after I worked out with the team or practice, and I'd go to his house, and he'd teach me some technique stuff with hands, punching, body position. And then, as the off seasons went on, I was a little bit heavy coming into college. I broke my ankle, my navicular bone in my ankle, so I was in a soft, like a walking cast for about 6 weeks leading up to college. Walk right into the conditioning test, and I'm 30 pounds heavier than I ever have been. So towards the end of my college career, I had carried that weight till about my junior year. And then I started working out with him, doing double days in the summer, trying to get down to, a range where I thought recovery was going to be good. I was my quickest. I was most explosive. And then, as the NFL started to creep in, and and started, scouting me and stuff. And the only reason I thought that it was legit is because I never saw scouts at practice other than my last 2 years in college, because there's not a lot of guys who come out of North Dakota. So, I had a little bit of apprehension thinking, oh, this is BS, because, I went through this in the recruiting process. They're just doing their due diligence or whatever. And then, started getting invites to All-Star game, two All-Star games. And that's kind of when you came into the picture.
Then you became a fifth rounder with the Broncos.
Yep.
All right, Chris, let's go to being a rookie and coming into Bronco facility, Dove Valley, as a rook, when you've got Tom Nalen and all these big-name guys playing for the Broncos. What was the biggest mental challenge you had as a rookie when you're trying to make the team? There's no guarantees you're going to make the team. Your goal is to make the team, and you don't get as many reps as maybe you were thinking you were going to get. Walk the audience through that.
My initial goal was, you probably don't like to hear this, but it was to make practice squad. I thought I'm not supposed to be in the NFL. If I make practice squad, this is a good deal for me. I ended up doing more than I thought, and then once you get into it, the vets, it was, for me, I tried to not stay away from it, like keep my mouth shut, because it was a tough room to grow up in as a young player, because there were a lot of vets, like you said, Tom Nalen, Matt Lefsis, Ben Hamilton, George Foster. They were all, probably four plus years, and 3 of them were 10 plus years. So no one was coming in, acting like they were somebody they weren't. And even if you thought you were somebody, or you actually were somebody, they were going to tell you otherwise. And it kind of humbled you. So it was the self-deprecating mindset was kind of where I started, not doubt, but a healthy amount of fear that you're not going to get your job done, or you'll let somebody down. And that, it kind of drove me through my whole career, because you always get that feeling at some point, or I always did at some point prior to a game, regardless of who you're playing against, any of these guys can beat you on any given snap. So, my mindset was, don't get embarrassed, don't let people down initially. And then once I figured out, hey, I can block, so-and-so, whoever it is across from me, and you got to do it to actually get the confidence. And then once that happens, then you start to learn the game a little bit. And then you start to take some of the stuff you see the vets doing, and then, my mindset changed. I made the roster, but I essentially redshirted that year. I only dressed for 3 games, and I think I only played 1 snap on special teams. So it was a tough year. I'd gotten hit the rookie wall, which probably hit me a little bit sooner than most, because I wasn't dressing for games. And I got snapped off by the coach. He was going through my notes one day and just saw that I kind of mailed in the first meeting. I just wrote, our opponent was Pittsburgh, so I just wrote Pittsburgh Pitt on there. And so he kind of reamed me, and that was So that was another. You just get those little things you'll never forget along the way that motivate you or push you in a certain direction, whether or not it's to prove somebody wrong or prove somebody right, or do your job for a teammate or a coach, any of those things. But you don't get the initial confidence to understand that you can play in the NFL until you actually take a step on the field and are blocking NFL players.
Okay, so Coach, you're a coach now, and you have rookies come into the NFL, and you're in charge, and you have a lot of hands-on coaching with those rookies. What do you tell the guys that come in 2020, 2019 that you wished a coach would have told you back in 2006?
It's hard to it's coach speak. What you say, like, it doesn't matter where you're at on the depth chart now. It matters where you're at the end of camp, or you got here. That's part of the deal, but you're gonna have to start somewhere. And if you start on the lower end, you always tell these guys, like, it doesn't matter where you start, and you can see it come to fruition with some guys. We had a guy this year, Austin Schlotman, who you probably had, in April, he might have been the odd man out, but that's why you go through the whole process of spring, training camp. Austin Slotman, his second-year player, ended up starting 2 games for us at the end of the year, and he played well. So you can point to those and say, hey, it doesn't matter where you start. You put your head down and flip and work, and that's part of it. But more so now with the kids these days is just be seen. Don't be heard. Don't step on your tongue because, you're trying to project something you're not. Just go out there and work and let your work decide what everybody thinks of you, which is, I'm not saying to dull your personality or not be yourself. I am saying like that on hold until you prove that you can do what you're brought here to do.
Let your actions speak louder than your words. And I think it's old-fashioned, but it always wins, is let your work do the talking. And I think today in the social media era that we're in, everybody wants to tell the world what they're having for dinner and what they're doing every day and how great they are and how great their life is and how great their situation is. And I think as a player, it's the opposite. You gotta really just grind and do your job.
Yep.
I don't know if you see a lot of the social media presence with your players, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's just at some point in time, dude, you got to play ball.
Yeah, and it's a big deal, and I'm not like I don't have an aversion to it by any means. I mean, it's necessary now. You can see there's a ton of guys that are make a bunch of money they probably shouldn't have made just being an NFL player because they've taken a platform and decided made a whatever they do made a little bit more money on a social media platform because of who they portray or what they push on that platform. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it at all. I think it's a good tool. But the one thing I would say is you can't let anybody outside of the building that you're in decide what kind of player you are, how you grade it out, because it's all relative, right? There's nothing out there that is going to tell you how you played or tell the world how you played other than what you actually put on the field. So those things, those guys, they'll get done playing or practicing or whatever, and they go straight to it. I don't know what they're putting on there, but my suggestion would be to use a platform for doing. There's a lot of guys who won't do a bunch of good stuff on it and don't use it for a pump up or a needle on whether they're playing good enough or not. It's just one of those things that you use the right way. And everybody, the society now is, we want everything now. We want everything instant. We want instant gratification and everything. And football's still one of those games and jobs that you are going to get the instant gratification after a game, but the product isn't finished until you've finished your career. So that's one part of, to segue into a mindset would be, you take all those things you learn, and as you go, as your body gives, as you don't have the athleticism you did when you were 24 and now you're 32, there's all those tools that you've learned along the way. You can use those to squeeze out another 2 years, another 3 years. You can bank on technique and bank on film study, and so use it the right way. Basically, what I'm saying is there's times to use it. There's times that you can, you might be required to use it based on a contract or something. But there are things that you can take, and especially from the old school guys that are still around the league, is you want to pull as much as you can from the guys that you can emulate. All right, you pull from a bunch of different guys that maybe you have the same body type, maybe you play similar. But that was my mindset as the career went on, was, all right, now my left leg isn't working as well, or now I came into the NFL with a bad shoulder and I hadn't got it fixed to this day. There's just workarounds that you figure out along the way, and I think football's the same. I think initially when you get in, it's hard to learn all that technique and all that stuff. Like, there are things that you're going to have to lean on your athleticism, physical gifts, and everybody's are different. But as you work years down the road, start banking all those tools that you pull from somebody else or something that a coach told you, and you implement them, and then your game has changed from. And I thought this too. I thought when I was in year 6, which is when I got injured, I thought I've kind of got a good blend of still having the athletic ability, still loving to play, still loving to study it, and also working the game within the game to have a successful snap, every snap. So whether that be reading a defensive lineman stance, reading a coverage shell, things that you can anticipate and make your job, the process of your job, a little bit easier.
Gotcha. So you're one of those few individuals, and there's you're not the only one. There's many, but there's really not that many guys that have gone to the NFL Combine as a player as well as a coach. Describe for our audience the difference between going as a player and what you're feeling, what you're trying to accomplish, what your fears are, what your mindset is, compared to when you show up representing the Dolphins or the Broncos and you're evaluating those same guys you were 10 years before.
Yeah. Well, what I did learn was because of my specific situation, I did pretty good at the Combine. I thought that I had better number. I thought that I should have had better numbers. So just a quick conduit would be those numbers do mean something, but they don't mean everything. So as a player going into it, those numbers mean everything to you because you think, shoot, I ran a 5.01. I ran a 4.92 in training 2 days ago. Like, what is that going to do to my draft stock? Or so those things that you can wear yourself out on and go over the top and overcorrect. I think a lot of that stuff, people just want to see your physical ability and see what you're able to do. All the training helps. There ain't no doubt. The training really does help. And there's a little tricks you can pick up, but it's not the end all be all. It's not, and that's what I know as a coach. So when I go there as a coach, I'm not really watching the workout. I mean, I'll watch it, but I'm not. And this is me specifically. There's a lot of guys who go there because we all are going to get all the information. We're going to have from our own scouts that are hand timed. We're going to get from the NFL that is laser. We're going to get, and there's coaches who hand time on their own and record everything on their own. I'd really go and watch and see how they do it. Does it look really, really hard on a guy to get out of the stance and burst for 10 yards? Is it really difficult for them to transition in and out? What does that look like opposed to what is their time? Because I think there's more you can pick up, and usually it's on the tape after the Combine as a coach that I watch and see. A lot of times I won't even have the times. I'll just look and watch them and see, I'll go back and check and see what their time was. Yeah, that's what I thought. That should have been a good time. But the next guy might have a great time, and it looks like garbage. It's clunky. It's hard for him to bend and transition and all those things. So as natural as you can go into that and use your natural ability, it's gonna create positive evaluations or negative depending on what you might have some deficiencies or some things that don't work as well as others. But those things you can't work out. You can't go outside yourself to train for a Combine. It's such a small blip on the radar comparatively when you go down the road and you're a pro player.
Chris, is it fair to say that when guys go to the Combine and they're running the 40, doesn't matter the position. Obviously, the skill guys, it's a little bit more important, but they're gritting their teeth. They're in a position that's not sustainable. It's not repeatable. It's not something you can do 72 times in a game.
Right. Yeah.
And so right? And so what happens is, man, that clock time looks really good. But, man, now you put on pads and a helmet and you've got to box somebody, tackle somebody, catch something or whatever it may be. You can't do that.
Yeah, we see it. We see it every year now that I'm in coaching is when we actually get the player and it's springtime and there's no pads on, there's shorts. And I'll speak specifically to offensive line, is that there's guys in shorts and T-shirts. They're out there blocking the best we have in April. And then they're doing it in May. And then, you'll fast forward to training camp. Some of those guys start to get marginalized. So, we call them off-season off-season All-Americans or whatever it is. Those guys, the guys in shorts that can do it. But that's really where I see what you're saying. I see that transition in offensive line to, oh, now this guy's been marginalized because we got pads on. Now he can't sustain a block. He can't do this and that. And so there's plenty of that.
Okay, so let's go back to the Underwear Olympics as well as like training camp, preseason, and this season. What is the guy that, especially with offensive linemen, since you've played with a bunch and you are an offensive lineman and now you're an offensive line coach, what's a guy that tricks you? Meaning you think he's going to be good and he doesn't end up being good. And then what's the opposite? The guy, what's the characteristics of that guy that constantly suckers you compared to the guy that perhaps you're unimpressed with, but he's the dude that ends up being the baller? What's the characteristics of both of those different types? Because both of them they're similar in the sense that they trick the coach. One the right way, one the wrong way.
Yeah, I'd say the easy one to point to is those guys who are the freaks, the body freaks, the speed freaks, strength and all that stuff. You'll see like wow plays, and then it's going to be a lot of dulled down, unremarkable plays. But you'll see those, like we call them flash plays, I guess, where they just maul a dude, or make a cutoff or a pass block that's like, wow, that was really good recovery. Or so you're like, all right, he's got all this physical ability. It's not all on tape, but we're gonna get him. We'll pull it out of him, and we'll get it figured out to where it's he's playing at that wow level or flash level more than he's playing at that dull dim level. And then the opposite would be is usually the guys that don't look great in shorts and t-shirts, and those guys are the ones that they struggle without pads on, and you can't say like, oh yeah, when we get pads on, this guy's gonna be way better, because that's usually not the case, but sometimes it is the case. And sometimes the guys who, like, the day before, he got beat because he had a bad body position in this block, and you correct him on the block, he gets the same rush, he makes the correction the next day, and those are the guys that surprise you. Those are the guys that are going to continue to do that, and they're going to continue to learn and take things from guys and coaches, and the stuff that shows up right away, the fixes that they make, those are usually the guys that surprise you on the positive end. The negative is usually the guys that have some kind of overwhelming trait that, all coaches think that we'll be able to get it out of them. Sometimes there's other variables that you can't control that end up letting you down.
Well, what you just described for the guys that positively surprise you is that they've got a growth mindset. They're focusing on getting better every day, every rep. They're listening to their coaches, and they're taking that coaching and adjusting their style of play, adjusting their technique, adjusting their mindset, even how they look at how to handle or attack a certain play or pass protection or one-on-one drill or whatever it might be. So I think that the thing that I've seen from doing this for a long time is that I would break the guys into three groups, and I'm assuming that they all can play. The one group has so much athleticism that they never had to do technique. So when coaches start coaching them, candidly, back in college and high school, they never listened. So they hear it, but they don't apply it because they can't. They just can't process.
They don't need to. Yeah.
They don't need to. They don't know how to. So for those guys top out, even though on the athletic spectrum they're the winners. But when they start getting older and they start losing a step, and that's when they're done. Their career comes to crash in and quick.
Yeah.
Then you got the guys in the middle. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to piggyback off that. Is that that's 100% true, and that's a lot of the times, and you even see it in the NFL. Those uber talented guys that they don't get coached in high school, they don't get coached in college, and sometimes they don't get coached in the NFL. So when you start to coach them and give them feedback or positive or negative, whatever it is, because it's all part of the process. Yeah, they've never had to take that feedback or use it. Well, now you're playing against the equivalent of you on the other side of the ball, and you're trying to block him. Now your talent has been marginalized. Now what can you do to sustain and win the majority of your snaps? Well, if you haven't picked up or listened or implemented any of those techniques or whatever a coach is teaching, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to do your job, especially in the NFL.
And then I agree. And then the second group are the guys that have a lot of athleticism. This is probably you. You had a lot of athleticism, but you weren't that freak.
No.
And because you had a lot of athleticism, you were able to do a lot, but you also were extremely coachable. Yeah. So that's the guy that can go to the Pro Bowl. That's the guy that can do it for a long time unless he has some type of injury or something that short circuits his career. That's the guy that I want on my team, even though everybody's looking for the left tackle that looks like, Tarzan and plays like Tarzan. But most Tarzans play like Jane. And then the third group are the guys that don't have enough athleticism, that they have to do everything in their power to do it the right way. So their careers depend on their coaching and their opportunity. If they don't get good coaching and they don't get an opportunity, a lot of times they live on the practice squad until they replace them with somebody else.
Yep.
Or they might be, the seventh man dressing for a game, and you hope you don't have to put him in.
Yep.
But then he gets put in, and he might play 10 years because he does everything right, because he listened, he soaked it up, he applied it, and he takes care of his body. He's not the guy that's, staying up late, drinking all the time, living a crazy lifestyle, because he can't. Because if he does, he's not going to make it.
Yep. And I was on that end of the spectrum as far as that goes too, because I was always the nervous, like, I'm not doing anything but football when it's football season. Even in the off season, I was always like that. I played with guys, but I thought they were better players when they were living on the edge. They were out drinking until 3 or 4 in the morning, and then they'd come in on Sunday and have 14 tackles and a pass breakup, and 3 of those are tackle loss. Like, there are guys that are uber talented and can do all that stuff. And then I think them living at that red line all the time bodes well for them on the football field, whereas probably 95% of the population it would never work for it. It'd never be sustainable. You'd never be able to play in the NFL. But there's a few of those guys in the league that can do that.
Well, I would say that, I'd never thought about this before, but the way you just described it, it totally clicked in my mind. There are some guys that are bored. In fact, they love music more than football. They love other things more than football because football comes so easy to them. Yeah. That when they have these distractions, when they challenge themselves to say, stay sober and be on, they can. And they perform at a very high level because they're not bored, because they've been able to do these other things to kind of spice up their life. But very few guys like that. And as a head coach, you don't want your leadership to be all those guys. You want that to be
right. Typically, those guys aren't like and if you're on a good team with good leadership, typically those guys, they might be your best player, but they're not your leader. Usually the leaders come from had to do it a different way, probably more the way that I had to do it, because they can speak to everyone and it'll make sense to everyone, because they had to work. It'd be like Champ Bailey or Von Miller telling someone how to get a sack, Champ telling someone how to cover. Those guys will have issues telling somebody how to do it, because my body just doesn't work like that. I can't do what you just told me to do. So those guys end up being like peripheral leaders, not Champ. Champ was special, Von special. I'm just saying that there's guys in the league that maybe your best player, you probably point to them as a leader. There's usually another guy who's like the locker room leader, and it just depends. The makeup of the locker room and the makeup of the team and franchise, it depends on how the roster is built.
Well, let me ask you this. When you are going to Indianapolis and you're going down to Mobile to the Senior Bowl, and you have a list of offensive linemen to evaluate, how much different is it evaluating a left tackle to a center to a right guard? And what similarities do they have to, what characteristics do they need to have in common, regardless of where they line up on the field?
Yeah. So I always have, and I think all coaches are different. They have like a different trait that they look for. But I would say like the bottom line. So I guess to your point when we were talking about the different makeups of different guys, and that, so offensive line play is very, very different to the rest of the game. There's a lot of things that offensive linemen do that, like, you can get it done physically, you can get it done with technique, you get it done with a combination of all those things. So if you look at tackles, I would look at, there's length, right? Tackle is specific, in my opinion. Arm length in general is like there's about a minimum standard, and then you kind of go down. If he's not hitting the marker on the length, right? Well, does he have another characteristic or quality that overcomes that? Is it bend? Is it strike? Is it foot quickness? Is it, does he shave the angles better to where that doesn't show up? So, tackles, really often all offensive linemen, like, you want to look at suddenness in their body. Can they generate power from the ground quickly? Or are they plotters, or does it take them a little bit to work into the block? And all these guys can play in the NFL, but do they have those other characteristics to make up for? So when I say suddenness, I just explained that, bend, and length at tackle, and then you start to go through. Well, what does he have that makes up for this deficiency? Is he going to be able to play in the NFL with that? He's got 32-inch arms. He's really quick in the blocks though, so it doesn't show up, and he's really good with hand timing, so his length doesn't show up negatively, right? Are we going to be able to transfer that to the NFL? And then you look at guards, and it's different for every offensive line coach, every scheme and all that stuff. Guards, they have to be smart. They have to be able to process it. They have to be able to make quick decisions, and this center falls in this category as well. And you look for all the same things. However, length isn't as important to me as long as he's got a redeeming quality that's going to make up for it. And I think a combination of who you got playing together. So if there's a center that's super smart, athletic, can move, lacks some of the length or one of those other qualities that we look for, what if the two guards next don't have that? Does that make him a better player? And a lot of times you can say it does. You can find different combinations that, for whatever reason, work better, and our line plays better. That position group is really specific in terms of being non-specific. Like, there's 1,000 different body types, 1,000 different ways you can get the job done. I've seen it done, and I've done it. So, like I said, those 2 or 3 baseline things, and even more so now is the competitiveness. Are they straining on every play? That's when you see that, it's almost like, oh, this guy plays hard, which sounds stupid, but it's hard to find a guy that plays hard every snap now.
That's a fact. So let's look, when you're looking at college film, well, let's just go to Power 5. Let's even go Big 12, Pac-12, where they throw the ball a lot.
Yeah.
And they're in a spread where the quarterback a lot of times is told where to throw the ball, and it's just, there's no real pocket, and they don't have to sustain pass protection. How do you evaluate a player in that situation?
Yeah, look, it's really hard. What you do is you trying to find all those physical characteristics, and so I say you really got to go through you got to go through a lot of tape. Really, you got to go through a lot of tape to see, oh, he can do that. Just because the way that this D lineman moved and the way that he had to execute this block, you saw one of those little characteristics you're looking for show up, and then now you're projecting, and you're projecting all the time, college to pro. But obviously, if there's an offense that's run more like a pro offense, then you have an easier job projecting. So what I've done, and I'm not saying it's the right way because I'm new to this, is I just go through the tape as much as I can to find what I'm looking for. If I don't find it, I don't find it. It's not on tape. So then you got to go another route. You go through, the combine workout to see, can he bend? Can he do this? Can he do that?
Hang on a second, Chris. You keep saying bend. For the average fan, I'm not sure what the
flexibility.
The average fan.
Sorry, yeah.
That's okay. So flexibility, what does that mean, though, in terms of doing your job as an offensive guard, offensive set, whatever it may be?
Yeah. At guards, I look at ankle flexion a lot. Ankle flexion, and it might be just because of me, how I was made up, and how it negatively affected me when I did have the ankle
restrictions.
Injury.
Yep.
Yeah. Because what I learned as I went through, I didn't know this until I was done playing, was I was never really the strongest guy in the weight room. I wasn't a good weight room guy. I was really good at dynamic lifts, like power cleans, where there was, a movement and you're moving the weight. It's not just squats, it's not just bench. Like the static stuff I was not good at. I was just, middle to lower end on that stuff. But the more dynamic movements and the more dynamic lifts and stuff I was good at. And a lot of it had to do with how flexible I was, and ankle flexion was a huge part of it. I was able to absorb power quicker, faster, and work out of it. And my arm length was fine, my strength was okay, but the ability to bend in my hips, my waist, and knees, really the ankles, I thought was super important, and ended up making up for some of the other shit that I couldn't do. So yeah, when I'm saying bend, it's one of those, is he stiff in the hips, which is a problem because eventually you have to roll your hips into a block. Like that's where you create power. But as you go lower on the kinetic chain, can he create it from his knees or his ankles to take that hip impingement out? Like that doesn't matter because he's got really good ankle flexion power, and he can create it in another way. So that's what I'm saying when I said bend. It's really a three or four different ways, and then is it functional? Right? Because you can go watch the guys bend at the combine, and they can drop their ass to their ankles, but you might not have like the suddenness to really create space and move people.
What happens to a guy that, like you did this, you play tackle in college, but your profile, your prototype, your measurements are more consistent with being an inside guy?
Yeah.
What are the key indicators for a college tackle to be able to play guard? And what are some of the key indicators that show you that he can't? And this is all projection.
Yeah, I think it's usually those two things, the suddenness and the bend, but processing overwhelmingly the guard. That's when you got to talk to the guys. You got to push them and test them and see how quickly they can process. Are they making good decisions when it's crunch time? Right. So that would be first and foremost. But you can't really get to that unless you talk to the kid. So if you're just watching the tape, then I think it's flexibility, suddenness, quickness. They usually have length already at tackle, right? So
yep.
That's helpful at guard. And we drafted Dalton Risner this year, and I never really put that much weight into how long a guard's arms were, because I didn't think you absolutely needed it, which you don't absolutely need it. But a guy like Dalton Risner, who we did have to project inside, now I've gone through a whole season of watching him and how much his arm length helps him. Whereas you might get another guy who doesn't have that arm length, might be able to execute the same way, but that's just one of those redeeming qualities that you're not going to lose. Like his arms are always going to be that long.
Let's talk about Dalton for a second. He was a second-round draft choice for the Broncos, came out of Kansas State. I believe he might have been a right tackle in Kansas State.
Yeah.
How difficult is it for a guy from the Big 12 to go from tackle to guard, go to the NFL, and start as a rookie?
Yeah, there's probably not a lot of guys have success with it, and especially the success that Dalton had. But that had everything to do with Coach Munchak really pushing to get him in on a visit and talk to him, and then I got to watch Munchak, really work him and see the kid process quickly, confident, sticks to his guns, and he did a good job with that part of it. And that was kind of what sold us on it, because he's a tough kid, he's a captain there. He loves football, and he's a great person. Like, all those things were like, you wouldn't get that off of tape. You have to meet a guy like that, and then you see like, oh, he's made up of the right stuff. And if he fails in the NFL, it ain't gonna be because he doesn't try hard enough or any of those things. Like, something else has to happen, because you already know the makeup of the guys. He's gonna work his ass off to do everything above and beyond what you ask. And he's kind of a special kid and special situation that worked out positively for us.
Let's get to Miami. Talk about one of the guys there that either panned out and you didn't think he would, or didn't pan out and you thought he would. And what were the facts?
The panned out, easy one to point to would be Laramie Tunsil panning out. One of those guys that, was in those offenses that's hard to project. And he kind of fell in our lap, and, we get the kid, and some of the things that we did a little bit of evaluation on him, but we thought he was going to be the top pick, the first overall. We weren't picking until 12. So we had to, we did him just to compare him to the next level of tackle. And then, when he falls to us, it's like, okay, now here's the work. So the kid he ends up playing guard to start with, which set him back a year, basically. So there's not much other than him getting to play, which was positive. He was a starter, and he started left guard playing next to Brandon Albert for a year. But you still didn't really know what you had, other than the fact that he was a freak athlete and had freak movement skills. He's a guy that, you weren't sure, even after year one, is he going to be able to play left tackle, because now he's created some habits at guard, which with a special athlete like that, he's fine doing that. Inside, where the thing that surprised me the most was how strong he was, because he's a higher cut athlete, looks kind of like a basketball player, but he is super wiry and strong, and with the foot quickness, he's got a pretty special makeup. He hasn't, made the Pro Bowl for the first time this year, but he's one of those guys that, I came in 4 months before he did. We developed a really close relationship, and, I worked with him on a daily basis, and, still talk to the kid to this day. So he's one of those guys that you still weren't sure, even though he was picked where he was picked and how high he was picked. There's a lot of factors where you're not sure that this kid's going to pan out.
I think he was under the microscope too, because of what happened on draft weekend, and the reason why he fell, and you guys got him. There's obviously a lot of media interest in to see how he pans out. So if he could have gone a little bit incognito with the media, I think his career would have got off to even a faster start. Because I think one of the things that's happening today that didn't happen 20 years ago is the media scrutiny and the media access to every single player, and the players have to be available. And it really got the heat got turned up a little bit when NFL Network was born. That These guys, they can't hide anymore, and so they can't just go to work. The average Joe can go to work, go home, be a dad. An NFL player has got like almost a bipolar personality, because he has to do his job. He has to be ready for Sundays. He has to be ready for practice. He has to have a connection with his coach. He has to know what he's doing. And at the same time, he's managing his social media and, personality.
Fighting all the pundits, fighting that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that happens to coaches today now that didn't happen before. So it's, you're seeing a lot of coaches in the league now being one and done, two and done. That was unheard of, a couple decades ago.
It probably should still be today. If you hire a head coach, you should give him minimum 3 years to get. At that point, you don't even have a draft of guys that are doing what you want.
I would say 3 or 4 minimum.
Yeah,
and if you're going to invest, if the owner's going to invest the money in a coach, give them 4 years and just understand there's going to be some bumps in the road. You're not hiring a new coach because everything was going great. most of the time. So, with the media scrutiny and just the exposure that the players have, I think it makes it harder to coach, and I think it makes it harder to play.
Oh, yeah. There's no doubt. And, I assume now you have to have some realization that it's going on, but the social media stuff was starting up when I was still playing, and it obviously wasn't as big as it is now, but I was completely oblivious to it because I never had didn't have Facebook or any of that stuff. But now now everybody has access to the film too. So now everybody's a professional coach, and their opinion is blasted to millions of people, right or wrong. It's out there, and that's another thing that guys have to fight.
Well, let's talk about something that happened to you. You said it in year 6. You looked down and your ankle's going the wrong way. What was the hardest part about recovery?
I guess the uncertainty. With my situation, it was, I ended up having to get another reconstructive, to basically redo everything that had been done prior because I got a bone infection. So on top of that, it was trying to work around. Now my left ankle doesn't, it only flexes to about 40% of what my right ankle does. How does that affect me? There's just little things with injuries where you assume that a guy goes through rehab and then, he gets put on the field, so you assume he's 100%. Well, me specifically, I always needed I never took off time in the off season because it was always work for me to stay bulky, so that's one thing that was missing my last 2 years playing, because every year I was coming off of the training table right to practice. I didn't get the off season of actually training my body, the rest of my body. I was always working specifically on my legs or my core or, things that had to do with my ankle. So yeah, it was, the being in the training room, never really being hurt. I've never really been hurt like that, but being in the training room all that time and then going right to the field and trying to figure it out on the run was the hardest part.
I think one of the other harder parts was you'd become a captain, a leader of the team, and all-pro consideration, and now all of a sudden your career is going in a different direction because you're just trying to hang on, trying to get back. You're trying to figure out, okay, is this what I'm supposed to be doing anymore? And you have all these new pressures that you didn't have prior to the injury. So, I thought you gave it a unbelievable effort to come back, but it was just one of those injuries that really did change the course of your career. Because how old are you now, Chris?
37.
So you would be done either way, but there's a chance you could have played, 5 more years.
Sure. Yeah. And we obviously had this conversation when I was going through it, but there was a chance. I could have stuck it out and tried to chase vet minimum, go in other places. I was fortunate enough to, be in the same place for 8 years, and like you said, be a captain here for 3 years. And that made more sense to me than going and trying to continue the career where I felt like it was going to be, I'm going to be fighting this thing the whole time I'm playing it, and then, whatever I got to do to get through pain and all those things. And then you factor in family, 2 kids, now I have 4, but 2 kids at the time moving, it didn't make sense to me. And I might have shut it down a little bit faster than a typical player in my position, but I felt like I was enough to the point where that wasn't something I wanted to do.
If you're a dad, you have a very close connection to a young man, and let's say he's an offensive lineman in college, knowing what you know as a player, knowing what you know as a coach, and they have so many temptations, so many options, video games, girls, fun, fishing, hunting, golfing, everything else. Is it really worth it to play in the NFL? And if it is, how do you focus your mind so that you can maximize your opportunity?
Yeah. So I'd say obviously you're going to have some of that. The way you're brought up is going to have some of those qualities, or the ability to put your head down and not get distracted by stuff. I'm not saying I didn't do that shit. I mean, I did. I had fun in college, and I had fun to the point that I knew where I couldn't have fun. You know, I couldn't have fun 2 days. I couldn't go out drinking 2 days in a row. You know, and I'd go drinking once.
You knew your limits.
Right. And I knew that I don't do this well. I don't recover well on, when I'm drinking. So you have to, it's a learning process like it is in the NFL. Like you have to learn how do you operate best. And for me, I can only speak to myself, I was probably a little closed-minded on that stuff. So even the off-season stuff as a pro that they offer the free, you can go do like all these different boot camps. In my mind, I always thought, what's the point of that? And right or wrong, it's just how I am built. I just thought, this period of time, if you are going to play in the NFL, you have a shot play in the NFL, you want to do it, the period of time to do it is very small. And why would I go try and learn how to be a broadcaster when I haven't gotten to a point in my career that I should be able to leave and take a job? It didn't make sense to me to do any of that stuff, and I limited distractions to the point where I was probably an asshole. I'd not a whole bunch of dinners out or families in town. Unless it was like a Friday, I kind of ignore them. I'm not saying to do any of that stuff. I'm just saying you have to find the way that you know that you are operating at your best self, I guess, your best as a player, student, any of those things. I don't think there's a right way to do it. Like I said, we talked about throughout the podcast, there's different ways guys have done it. But for me, there ain't anything else to be concerned with other than, your family. But if you have this time period and you're allotted, you've made it to this point and you have a chance to be an NFL player, why wouldn't you just sink everything into it?
Amen. I'm going to kind of restate what you said, and what I heard you say is that it's individualized and everybody's got to make their own decisions about how they approach this opportunity of playing in the NFL. But you got to know what works for you. You have to know your limits. You have to know what you can get away with. You have to be comfortable in your own skin. If it works a certain way for someone else, it might work for you too, but it might not.
Yep.
And you got to find your own way.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question. You had I'll never forget this. You went to a draft party with Kyle Orton. Then I don't know what year this was. And
2010.
2010. So they drafted Demarius with the first pick. And you guys were leaving, and the crowd went crazy. So you guys went back in to see that, Elway had traded up to take Tim Tebow.
Yeah.
And I happened to be at Mile High when the Broncos first put Tim Tebow in the game, and the fans were chanting for him. And Kyle Orton's wife, maybe his girlfriend, but his lady, and his dad were sitting like 2 seconds away from me, and they got up and left when Coach put Tebow in.
Yeah.
And then I remember the offense just being abysmal. And you guys went to Kansas City one time, and correct me if I'm wrong.
2 for 8. 2 for 8, 59 rushes for 299 yards, and I think Tim was 2 for 8 with a catch and touchdown, or 2 for 8 with a completion and a touchdown or something like that.
Well, I remember the 3 and outs. Wasn't there like a dozen 3 and outs or something? It was crazy.
I mean, they knew we were running the ball. We knew we were running the ball, and it was Romeo Crennel's, that old school 3-4 defense. So, yeah, I'm sure we had plenty of 3 and outs. We had a lot that season. I actually just read something that Baltimore is the only other team to rush for more yards than they throw for. The last team to do that was 11, the Broncos in 2011. I just saw that stat. So, yeah, there was that's actually one of the years, 2011 was one of the years I was more proud of. And I know we're talking about 2010, but, it carried on in 2011.
Well, share for our audience, Tim Tebow's kind of faded into the landscape a little bit, but when he had some magic to him, what was it about him and his mindset as a leader, as a quarterback, running your offense, especially late in the game when you guys came from behind. What was it about him? I haven't asked you about a lot of other people, and I probably should ask you about an offensive lineman, but what is it about Tebow that made him special?
So I'll follow with like two other things I think that the fans, public, should know as well. That the defense completely played out of their mind towards that, when he kind of took over. The thing that I thought that he had that was special, I mean, it was complete chaos until a lot of those games in the fourth quarter where sometimes he just had the confidence. And I was in the huddle when he did it because I'd help him with some of the run checks and stuff, and he would just call his own number, or he'd just take off and scramble, or a lot, just a lot of off-schedule things that, because of how hard a worker he was, like he was going to get it done somehow. Now we had to be in games for those to matter. We had to be within striking distance for that to matter, and I think the whole team kind of picked up, defense especially, picked up for that, and we played a lot of tight games where we won them late. But the fourth quarter was, I think that's where he was special, was it might be chaos, and you might be abysmal, like you said, for 58 minutes of a game, and that's when you count on those playmakers who he wasn't your traditional playmaker, because it's usually it's a guy that you throw down to the field or throw to down the field, or for some reason at that point in the game, that's when he became a playmaker. That was kind of consistent, but a lot of it felt like, what is going on here? How are we winning these games?
But you kept winning, and it was magic in the fourth, because it was like watching paint dry for three quarters, and then the fourth quarter, everybody in the stadium, everybody sitting on their couch watching the Broncos is anticipating this to happen, and then it would happen.
Yep. So
it was crazy.
Obviously that's the guy gained a following, so he gained a following in the locker room. He was like, all right, everyone's gonna buy their time and try to keep this thing close, and we'll see if we can get it done in the fourth. So
that was cool. Well, Chris, I want to thank you very much for being on today. We talked about a lot of different things. I want to wish you nothing but the best in your coaching career, and especially the dad of 4, and that's a lot of responsibility, and you got an awesome wife. And so I just want to thank you for being on.
Thanks. Yeah, it was awesome.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Pro Mindset. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. 5 stars, of course. You can follow us on our website, promindsetpodcast.com, or on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Pro Mindset Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you the next time.
Leftovers. Or the DMV.
Number 97.
Or house cleaning. Or
Chumba Casino always brings the fun. Play over 100 different games online for free from anywhere. You could redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. Live the Chumba life. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18+ terms and conditions apply. See website for details.